Super, thank you so much. Nice to see you guys here today. We are talking today about diversity and inclusion, how to do it, how it benefits us within an organization, and how diversity and inclusion translates into ROI for you and your businesses. And so I think it's a very important subject, and it's something that has become hyper relevant in recent times because of the introduction of sponsorship licenses and so on. I was really honored to be asked to speak here today. My name's Amrit Dhaliwal. I'm the CEO and founder of Walfinch. Walfinch is a home care provider, and we started franchising about 4 or 5 years ago, and we are nationwide now. Thank you for coming in today. So, diversity in the workplace, what is it? How do we do it? And, what does it mean? Has anybody, gone else on courses and done some, proper educational stuff around diversity and how to introduce it in the workplace here? Anybody? No? Or courses? Yep, great. So what were your sort of key takeaways, just out of interest? I'm gonna come here and pick on you because I know you.
Well, what I always notice is that we actually know so much.
Yeah.
We do know, but we don't go into details because we're always in a hurry.
Yeah.
So going on a course like that for me was to pause and to really look, what does the other person need? Where do I come from my culture background where I can invest in diversity of the other person?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's great. And I think thank you so much. And it's so important to really think about the talent pool that we've got. It's really easy to bypass people and think, well, they won't know X because they look different, they speak differently, and so on. And it's a very, very interesting place to think, well, what talent and skills do we have locally? About 10 years ago, I had a wonderful carer. Her name was Carla. She was excellent. Portuguese lady that came in, but initially when you meet her, you wouldn't think she's going to be a great carer because she was just seemed angry all the time, really. But she was very loving, and she just had a resting, face that spoke differently. And all of our clients loved her, and she was just excellent. And she comes into the office one day, and I thought, she's super happy. I knew her little daughter, Nicole, and the whole works. And she comes into the office, says, Amrit, I'm leaving. And I was totally shocked. And I said, why, Carla? What's going on? And she said, look, I've got an admin role with the council. And I was like, admin? Like, you are wonderful at care work. And I really thought that she wanted to do it, and it was, her calling. And it transpires that her father was an accountant in Portugal, and she had always worked in his office and really wanted to pursue that career, and that was actually within her heart. And though she was a good carer, she wanted to kind of explore this whole different piece. And I said, look, and I thought about it, and I said, look, come back in tomorrow, let's talk about this. And I thought about it all night, and I thought, well, actually, she's got all of the skill set for someone that I would want working for me. I trust her. I would let her care for my mother. And so where else can we place her so that we're not losing her and the industry isn't losing her? So she came in the following day, and I said, how do you feel about bookkeeping? You've got this sort of skill, you did all this stuff for your dad. How do you feel about doing bookkeeping services? And she was like, look, yeah, I can do all of that. I understand software and so on. And, I had this constant problem of having part-time bookkeepers that would just leave because I was only offering them 10 or 15 hours a week. And I said, look, can we do a phased approach over the next 6 months? We'll phase you out of care and full-time into the office, and we'll build this role around you and your skill set. And what ended up happening was that over the next 18 months, I actually had one of the most useful people that I've ever worked with work right there on the desk next to me. And it was all because we were exploring a different set of skills and talent. And looking at her, you wouldn't think, well, You know, she was a little bit rough around the edges. Her English was, you know, questionable at times, and all that. But actually, if you hone in on the skill set and forget about the other part, and say, right, okay, how do I help you on softening those, you know, the skills, and how do I help you with how to answer the phone and all of the other pieces around that, and really help develop this part of it, you could be one of the most useful people we've got. She was great on data analysis. She really dug in. And what it meant for me was I also solved another problem that I had in the business of not being able to have this retained bookkeeper because there was not enough work for them. So, inclusion in the workplace. Has anybody here experienced the feeling of not being included in the workplace? Has anybody here experienced the feeling of not being included in a friend circle or in life? Yeah? Feels quite shitty, really, doesn't it? You know? And it's really interesting. I was speaking to, so I'm, you know, a lot of my time is spent within the franchising aspect of our business. And I speak to all of the incoming prospects, and there was a gentleman that had come across from India. And he said, look, you know, you're the first company I've spoken to that has really listened to what I had to say. You know, he had a thick accent, and, you know, he had visa stuff going on or whatever. And in the end, it didn't go anywhere. But, you know, we had a very open discussion with him, found out where he was at. You know, he had all of the finances, all of the rest of it, but he said, look, no one else has taken the time to speak to me, got me to a meeting stage, and explored that because I don't present in the same way. And I thought that must feel really horrible, right? You know, and this is someone that could be a director level person that could operate in the next 3 or 4 years £1 million business, and they're not taken seriously. I wonder how a care worker that has just come across from, you know, wherever they've come across from, would be feeling when they're at that interview stage. They don't quite know what's going on. They don't necessarily quite understand the references that we're making, and they don't know the local area and all of that. I wonder how that makes them feel. And, you know, and we started getting involved in sponsorship licenses a year or so ago, as it felt like so did the rest of the world. And I went into one of our offices in Oxfordshire, and I was just talking to a carer that was there. By chance, I came out of the loo, she was going in, I was like, hey, how are you? You just started, and where have you come from, and so on. And she's like, yeah, no, it's really enjoying it, the team's lovely, but it's a bit, you know, I'm just trying to figure out where to do my shopping and all the base level stuff. And I sort of walking back to my desk, and I spoke to the recruiting lady that we've got on, Laura, lovely girl. And I said, Laura, all of these people that are coming across, they don't have base level information. They don't know where to go for their dental hygiene. They don't know where to go for the GPs, for, you know, where to go for their shopping, whether they're Indian, whether they're African, you know, whether they've come from somewhere else in the Far East and so on. You know, why don't we think about that? And we know that we're recruiting from 2 or 3 different countries. Why don't we speak to a care worker that's been here for a much longer period of time, that knows all of the nuanced things. You know, where am I going to get my specific spices from? Where do I get my weekly shop from? All of that. And let's make a little information pack and make it really easy for these people that are coming along. Because, yeah, great. The guaranteed workers, they're not leaving, you know, and so on, apparently, though they can, and they do. And so why don't we make it really easy and think about that? Why don't we think about our care workers as consultants almost? Has anyone worked in a consultancy role ever? Yeah, this gentleman. So can I ask you, sir, if there was a client that delivered you a £50,000 a year level of revenue, you know, how would you treat them? Christmas cards and all of that kind of thing?
I think more importantly is to actually understand what's going to keep them going as a time again.
Yeah.
As well. So it's, you treat them really well, of course you do.
Yeah.
But what do you do for the next thing? How do you actually add significant value for that 50,000? That's how I feel.
That is wonderful, right? So how do you develop that? So as a care worker at £30 an hour rates, doing 25, 30 hours of care per week, you know, they're not going to be far off that 50K that they're delivering. Now, if that care worker was wearing a suit and sitting in KPMG, and you know, they were just in a different situation, we would be treating them like royalty. We would be, you know, we'd get to know their kids' names, their anniversaries, you know, they'd be getting handwritten Christmas cards and all of that. We'd be thinking about how they can tell all of their other friends about our business and how we can deliver more work to them. But when they're just a care worker, we don't care, right? It's like, cool, there'll be another one that comes in. They're only getting £10 an hour and so on. But what are they delivering? And actually, how do we multiply that? Neil Eastwood's around here today, and the gentleman, the author of Saving Social Care. And I would really recommend picking that up because it's a wonderful manual on how to recruit, how to retain, and so on. It's a great book. Now, one of the key things that Neil I've heard him speak a lot, and we've been on panels and so on, and one of the key things he talks about is recognition. And if we can recognize how a care worker, you know, and we can appreciate them, we can thank them properly, you know, that is so important. They will refer more care workers to us. Now, if every referral delivers another £50,000 to your business and you're not losing anyone, how powerful is that as a mechanism? And actually, it really just comes down to thinking about the skill set that we've got with, you know, care workers and foreign care workers, and often that are way more skilled than even us. You know, I worked with my very first business when I was 22 was a restaurant business, and the dishwasher had an MBA, and he'd come over, and I was talking to him, and I said, well, this is embarrassing, you know, because you know how to run this business, and I have no freaking idea, you know. And so it's a very interesting thing to think, well, let's ask the question, what were you doing before? You know, where have you spent your time? Maybe there's a GP that's working for you, or a doctor or a nurse or a surgeon from back home. And maybe they could be really, really useful in what we're doing. And there comes the benefit of the diversity piece, because you've not only got people that are going to be super skilled from elsewhere, but you've also got people that really can help you develop as a leader. And and I think often, how many people have worked in any type of management role in or out of care? Loads of us, right? It's hard. Yeah. Anyone find it easy? Right? And that leadership piece, often it's wrung out of us. Yeah. I mean, I find leading people one of the hardest things to do. It's draining. It's really emotionally hard. If you really care about it, it's really difficult. When I was a care provider for a Seoul location, won't give too much away. One of my competitors just starting right there, right? So it's IP here. When I was, I had this one location, and I used to think about every single care worker. And when they used to come in my phone, in the contacts, I would have their name, their spouse's name, how many kids, dogs, whatever, all of that. So, when I'm talking to them, I'd give them, and I'd have a little look at my watch, 5 minutes, focus time, one-to-one, right, how are the chickens doing? I know that there was that issue with the fox and all of that. How's that all going? And really dig in and just have that 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a long time of focused time with somebody. And actually, what I found by the time I sold that particular business is that my job in the office was purely talking to the team. I used to work from home on a Tuesday so that I could actually do my work, right? So, because when I was in the office, it was just boom, 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 and really thinking about it, and really, trying to get to know people and understand that. And if we can do that, they make you a better leader because they'll tell you what's going on. I had care workers coming to me and saying, look, the coordinator's giving all the good work to her sister. And I was like, great, now what do I do, right? I'm going to pee one of these guys off, and that's going to be a problem either way. And so, and you're put in these situations because they'll deliver the information to you and they'll help you navigate that. Sometimes you're going to have somebody that is in a position where, because of their cultural background, they might speak in a certain way, and it's interpreted in a different way by your clients. And so really understanding that helps you pair the right care worker to the right client, and which means that you both retain the care worker because they're not having this horrible sinking feeling every time they're going into someone's house, and you'll have a much better situation with your client when you're coming in for those reviews and quality assurance conversations. So I think that's one of the key things. But the other really key thing is around innovation. Has anyone worked with somebody that's come from far away, and far away could be Manchester, but and that's created some level of innovation within your business or your service? Yeah? Would you mind sharing?
So we've had someone who's come in from India to work in interest only in IT. Strong tech really was first sold in, but then because we engaged with that IT expertise, now runs pretty much a whole section of that, taking his passions and involving things like software and applications.
It's wonderful. And I actually had a similar experience where we end up automating a whole kind of credit control process because somebody looked at me and said, "Why are you doing it that way? We don't do it that way back where I come from." And I was like, "Really? Right? How do you do it?" And we sat down, we had this conversation, and I learned, and then that got me on to looking at new software and automation and technology and so on. And I spent a bit of time in the States, and diversity and inclusion doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're a person of color or you're a person with that doesn't speak English. It could be anything. And I spent a lot of time in the States and look at how they provide care. And one of the really interesting things is that they're probably about 15 years ahead of us at any one time. And when you're thinking about data analysis and technology, I was sitting with a care provider out there, and culturally, Americans are just tremendously different to us in so many different ways. And I was talking to this care provider. I think they had about 500 locations around the US, and I said, so tell me what I don't know, right? And it turns out I don't know a lot, right? But one of the key things I came away with was how they slice and dice data. What are they using in terms of technology for that? How do they look at it? What's they looking at? Sky TV, if anyone has it, has 1,200 data points for every household. There's a lot of data points as a care provider that you can extrapolate from carers, clients, and so on. What are we looking at? What are the 5 things that we're looking at that will help us drive that? And the problem that often we have is about implementing these things. And you have to be culturally sensitive and so on, and all of that. And it can be quite onerous as a task. Also, it can just scare us into doing nothing as well. And I think that one of the things that I found to be very practical and successful is arranging sort of subcommittees within your operation. So, and it might be that you've got 9 or 12 care workers and it's a small startup business, and that's okay. But can I pull 3 of those care workers and say, would you mind coming in for some beer and pizzas and talking to me about what we're not doing right? And can you talk to me about how we could improve this piece over here? Oh, and we've got this Mandarin speaking client over here, and you're from that part of the world, and how do we make that whole situation work better? Culturally, what needs to happen? Oh, we've got an Islamic person that's working for us, and it's Ramadan, but then we've got the hydration issues and so on. How do we navigate that? Can you support us in that and give us the kind of cultural differences and benefits and so on? And then we can distill that into a care plan and care provision and educating the other care workers and giving them a sort of speed course on, you can do this, you can't do that, I can have a male carer for that, but I can't have one for that, and so on. And it's not difficult, but it's hard. It's time consuming to set up committees, listening to people, but really hearing them, and not just going through the motions, writing it down, looking at it, reviewing that process in 3 months' time, and then comparing it with your Q&As, your net promoter scores, if anybody does anything like that. And I think surveying care workers and clients is a great way to understand whether you're doing the right thing, and doing it in an anonymous way, and saying, well, okay, can I send out a survey to all of my care workers? And if you do nothing else today, I would say, if you do one key thing after leaving here, set up a survey for your care workers. Figure out whether they're happy, whether they would tell a friend to come and work for you alongside them. And then understand why they've answered the way they've answered, whether it's good or bad. And if it's good, let's do loads more of that. If it's bad, let's think about fixing that. But then communicate what you're doing. Communicate the fact that you've got this information. Let's leave the egos at the door. And sometimes we're doing a crap job, and that's okay, because you're asking the question and we're going to fix it. Let's ask why. Let's tell them what we found, and then let's tell them that we're going to do X. And how does that feel? And they might not respond, right? But that's okay. And then let's implement the stuff. And then maybe 3 months later, maybe a month later, depending on what the action is, let's ask them again. How is it now? How does it look? How does it feel? What needs to change? Because we've got this great talent pool sitting there. And they're the people that are speaking to your clients. They're the people that you're delivering a service to as well. Your care workers, right? You know, they'll talk to your clients and they'll know the nuances of Mr. Jones way more than we will in the office after a care plan and an hour with them. Let's ask them the question. Let's figure it out. You know, and as a franchisor, diversity has helped us tremendously. You know, I've had the added benefits of the fact that my parents came over from India in the 70s. My maternal grandfather was part of the British Army, and so he came over earlier, as did my mother. And because of the cultural differences, my mother couldn't go to school after 14, because my grandfather, who died maybe 10 years ago at age over 100, didn't want her wearing the school uniform because it wasn't culturally appropriate. And so, you know, my mother had to grapple with not really being able to speak English, working in a factory from 15, feels a bit, you know, at sort of pennies for the hour. And the thing that they have told me growing up was that it wasn't jobs that they left, it was leaders. It was bosses that didn't understand them, and so on. And my father came over in the 70s, they married and so on, and developed their lives. But that has helped me be sensitive both to care workers in general, because it's that kind of attachment to people of they're laborers, right? They are people that churn in, do the work, and go home. But as a leader, you've got a responsibility to create an atmosphere for them that allows them to flourish, regardless of where they're from. And as a franchisor, that's helped me do the same thing. That's really got me thinking, well, actually, how do we do that for people that are from other parts of the world? And how do we help them develop our services and business? And then thinking about, well, okay, we've got franchisees that are all around the country, and these parts of the country have, you know, varying different community groups. For example, our branch in Harrow has a huge Gujarati community, and so our franchisee has been extremely successful, and she's from that background. Been given the wave. She's from that background, and she's been able to cultivate a whole service that is culturally sensitive to the Gujarati community, which actually was a lacking service there. You know, I've known care providers in North London that have, you know, delved deeply into the Jewish community, for example, and been able to build culturally sensitive services. You don't have to be from these backgrounds yourself. What you need to do is be a good leader and make sure that people that are delivering the service get it, and you've got someone heading that up that understands it, and then breaking it down into a process to say, well, when we're working with the Jewish community, the Gujarati community, and so on, here are the things, here are the do's and don'ts. here's the process, here are the festivals, here are the food groups that are allowed and not, here are the things to ask the questions on at assessment level and so on. And you could unlock this phenomenal potential within your services, and it could be worth millions of pounds ROI, but also it could be worth tremendous amount of happiness and removing loneliness for people that otherwise are trapped in this service that we provide, because, well, we're going to send Sarah regardless of what you say, and it's irrelevant to me whether you can speak to Sarah because you can't speak the language or not. And if we can get away from that thinking and think about how we couple that, you can unlock a tremendous amount of goodwill within what you do. And you think one of the key problems we've got in the UK is loneliness, but actually even people that are getting care are lonely. And that's quite an interesting thought and quite a sobering thought, I think. And how do we remove that and solve that problem? And and it could be simple things by saying, well, okay, there's things that we can fix. We had a problem in one of our locations where actually a lot of people were like, well, I don't know, when the chef asked for a bacon sandwich, I don't know that the bacon needs cooking, and so on. The bacon was in the fridge, and does it just go in a sandwich? I'm like, well, let's set up cooking classes for our care workers. What are the things that we can do to help them understand that kind of nuance piece? And how do we then go into our services and look at promoting that level of diversity? And asking the question is hugely important. Here are some of my details on my social media and so on, if you'd like to follow. So please do scan, and it'd be lovely to speak to people. But I think the key thing I would say today is, if you're walking away from today, one is thinking about diversity as not this huge mountain. It could be a really simple thing. It could be someone from the north that speaks slightly differently, and we just need to bridge that gap. And it could be about, telling someone from, South India how to make a bacon sandwich. So it doesn't have to be a huge task. The other thing I'd say is, please ask your care workers what they think. Ask the question, survey them, and keep on doing that. Because the feedback that you'll get from care workers, we're very good as an industry at getting feedback from clients, not so great at getting feedback from care workers. But the care workers are the guys out there doing the whole thing. They're the ones that know it. They know what's going on more than we do. Ask them the question. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hope you've enjoyed it and taken something away from it. Take care.